Okay, we're back. Now, we talked a little bit about developmental topics. We talked a little bit about intergenerational differences and what that means. And I want to look at one more concept to frame some of the ways that I think it can help you think about um, advocating for young people as we move through the rest of the class. And this is called the sociological imagination. I didn't make that up. This has come from other sociologists, including someone like Christian Smith, who is a sociologist out of Notre Dame. And I hope that perhaps this concept helps you understand the opportunity and the challenges that come with the work that we all do. So let me unpack this for you. When we think about this idea of a sociological imagination, we just need to remember that there are three sort of domains to keep in mind. There's the micro, there's the mid, and there's the macro. The micro is the closest element. This is the space where you can make impact and you feel impact in your everyday lives. These are the relationships you have, the work that you do, the world and the neighborhood of which you live in, okay? Now, this is the place where you see opportunity and challenge along the way, which I think is really, really important. And a lot of times this is where we spend the most of our time trying to make things better and navigate the world that we live in. The next piece is the mid piece. And this is really where you recognize the fact that not only do you have, say, your life or even perhaps your ministry, you are also connected with other institutions within the broader network of the world that you live in. So let's say you work at a church, you might care about young people, and at the same time, you recognize the fact that that your young people don't just come to your youth group, they go to school down the road, they frequent the library that's on the other side of town. There's a ballpark where they spend time. There's the lakefront where they hang out, whatever it might be. You recognize the fact that this mid space is often connected with other institutions and organizations and groups that, for better or for worse, can impact the people that you relate to, care for, serve, and all that comes with that, right? So you have the macro, and then you have the mid, and then you have what's also called the micro, the mid, and then what you also call is the macro. The macro are really the forces in the world that impact all of us, right? These can be economic forces, so the way the economy is working, or the choices that are made for everything from interest rates to the banking system, or the price of goods, or whatever it might be. It has to do sometimes with social things as well. When we think about racism, when we think about sexism, when we think about terrorism, all these factors have an impact on us as well. And so I think what we just need to recognize the fact is that the macro are the forces that are out there that are often quite dramatic, and in a lot of ways they impact us, but they're also, these are really, really big forces, right? So I think this is really, really important because I've seen in the past, it's really, really funny, like you'll see, I'll be at the airport and I'll see this group of teenagers walking by with like bright t-shirts on. Everyone has the same t-shirt. I kind of know they're probably a Christian group, and it'll say something on the t-shirt like, I don't know, making Mexico better, like, something like that, because they're all going to go down and build a house somewhere in Mexico or whatever. Like, it's fine, groups do that. We can debate and talk about mission trips and the value of them or not. But I think what can be misunderstood is, like, just because you're going to build a house in Mexico, micro level, doesn't mean that you're actually helping the broader community, mid, or changing Mexico, macro, right? And so sometimes I think we overestimate what the micro can do and miss sometimes the mid and the macro pieces that are there as well. And so all these pieces are really important. And I think a lot of times as we think about ministry, it can have a dramatic effect on the way that we do ministry as well. So let's think about that for a second. If we think about the micro, maybe from a youth leader standpoint, we can think about the ministry or the work that we do. What am I doing to make my ministry better? How do I make it more responsive? How do I make it more efficient? How do I make it more impactful and helpful to those that I sense that God has called me to serve or that I've been charged to serve, right? That's the ministry that we work on. And as leaders, we want to be like, yes, we want to make that better. I want to be a better leader. I want to do a better ministry. That's what it's all about. But a good leader can't stop there. A good leader also has to think about this midsection, and these are where the partnerships are. So if I advocate for young people and all I care about is making my ministry better, I miss the opportunity to think about the network of relationships that I can advocate for young people for by engaging them as well. So as a youth leader, what are my relationships like with the principals or the teachers of the schools? How am I connecting with other chaplains in the area? What conversations am I having with other parishes, faith communities, organizations that care about young people as well, where we can collectively think about our community and the partnerships that we have to not only care for my kids as well, but begin to think about how I use the influence and the resource that I have to partner with others to help to advocate for all young people within our community. Okay, so thinking about those partnerships is a very, very important part of the work that we do as youth leaders. And then there's the macro, which in many ways is just the systemic forces, right? These are the ones that we can't control. We know that they're bigger than us, but this is where oftentimes we just have to be aware of the systemic forces that are around us. If I'm oblivious to racism, that's going to have an impact on the ways that I help or hurt my students. If I am unaware or insensitive to the economic disparity within my community, that will have a dramatic effect on the type of work that I do. So what happens a lot of times is we just need to be aware of the systemic forces that are around us. We can't necessarily change them, but we don't serve our people, especially our young people, well if we're not aware of the forces that are placed upon us. Another one would be mental health, right? If I'm blind and deaf to the mental health crisis of young people today, the way I do youth ministry can actually contribute to mental health challenges rather than help it. You see what I mean? So these dynamics, I think, are really, really important. And I want you to keep these in mind, because I think as you think about the papers you're going to write, the way you think about youth ministry, I think to always keep in mind the micro, the mid, and the macro in the work that you do will oftentimes give you a broader, more developed approach of how perhaps you can best serve those that you sense God has called you to serve. So what does this mean? Well, a couple things to think about. Let me just give you some examples here. When it comes to the micro thing, I think there's some competencies that youth leaders can have, and we'll hopefully unpack some of these along the way in our course. One is, I just think that youth leaders have to be vigilantly empathetic, right? At the micro level, I'm caring about my young people and I'm seeking to understand them. I think that we have to be developmentally informed. Like, what is faithful living for a middle schooler compared to a high schooler, compared to a 22-year-old? That's important for us to understand. I think we can be theologically aware. What's happening in our world, and how does the gospel, how can we bring the gospel to bear on proclaiming good news to our particular community? I think we have to be missionally responsible. What are the needs of our young people? Pedagogically creative. We have to think really hard about the way that we teach, the way that we disciple, the way that we guide and lead those that are under our care. And I think we also have to be personally risk-taking, to recognize the fact that good ministry is going to cost us something. We're going We're going to take risks on behalf of young people. And there's something that's very, very personal and very, very important in that process. Okay. So those are maybe some things to just reflect on when it comes to the micro. And I think one of the things that we can ask ourselves as well here is like, where do I need to personally grow? Like, how can I become a better youth leader in the context that I've been called to? Very, very important, because I think when we do that, in light of the things that I've mentioned here, I think that we can be faithful to the micro perspective of our calling to young people. Okay. Now, when it comes to the mid, I think that we just have to continue to think about what it means to be skilled at partnering and how we share advocacy, right? I think what happens a lot of times, and maybe you've experienced this as well, like churches become like competition. Like if we can like get more kids than the people down the road, or if we can make sure like the kids, come to youth group rather than play football, we've like done something for the kingdom. And I think we just have to stop and kind of go, wait a minute, aren't we all in this together to advocate for young people, to help them navigate this world? And so what does it mean to partner well? What does it mean to share in our advocacy and be less worried about taking the credit and be more worried about doing what's best for young people in our communities? And so maybe those are just things to think about. And one of the ways we could do this is like, what's making, asking yourself a really, really honest question. What's keeping me from partnering? Is it ego? Is it time? Is it you don't know how? Maybe you've had a bad experience. Maybe you have like one partner, but you'd like more. I think as we grow as leaders, we have to constantly be asking ourselves, is like, who are we doing this with? Like, this world is so much bigger than us. And these partnerships, I think, can be something that can be really powerful and profound in the ways that we advocate for young people. And then when it comes to the macro, I think we just have to be informed and aware of the social, racial, cultural, gender, sexual orientation, and socioeconomic issues that are out there. And I'd probably add political and economic in there as well. Like our awareness of what's happening in the world and how it is coming to bear and impacting our young people is really, really important. We can't solve it all, but we can be informed and we can really work at that. This is where I think that we can grow in here by saying, what do I need to understand? I think it'd be great, like as youth leaders, to not think that the only books that we have to read is youth ministry books, right? I'm all about youth ministry books. But you're at seminary and you're also getting a lot of other topics as well, which I think is great. We might say, well, those aren't youth ministry courses. And I would argue that everything that you read and do is actually related to young people in some way. The way you understand history, the way you understand the economy, the way you understand politics, the way you understand current events, the way you understand racism, the way you understand these things have a dramatic effect on how you frame and are sensitive to, and aware of the forces that we are passing on to a generation that our young people are wrestling and navigating as well. So, I just want to encourage all of you to think about the fact that when we think about youth, being a youth leader or youth ministry, it's not just doing the program well, right? It's about these micro, mid, and macro forces that force us to think about how we can be better at what we do so that we can advocate for young people. And that gets me really excited because I feel like now we're talking. Like you've probably been at that point. We're like, doing the youth program is fun and all, but like, if that's it, like you're not going to be in youth ministry long, right? But if we realize that our advocacy for young people has all these elements associated with it, and we can speak to that, then we recognize the fact that advocating for youth, for young people, can take on multiple forms and multiple jobs in multiple ways. And that gets me really, really excited. I think about that a lot with my own role. I've been a youth pastor. I mean, I've done like the lock-ins. I've done the programming. I've met with students. And I love it so much, right? But I'm a different person than I was in my 20s, and so I there's a lot of things I can do, right? But I felt committed to advocating for young people. And so the ways that I think about being a youth leader and the ways that I want to engage and support young people has shifted over the years, where I have been a youth pastor. I have been a pastor overseeing youth ministry positions. I've taught youth ministry, and now I'm teaching and researching on young people, right? I'm somehow trying to use whatever gifts, passions, opportunities that I have to think about the micro, the mid, and the macro from the vantage point that I have that's been given to me to advocate for young people. And that's the same for you as well. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I think we can do this. And this is kind of the thing. Like, if we can think about it in that way, then I think we're going to be advocating for young people for a long time. And I think in the long run, we move the needle and we really, really help them. And I know that's what you're all about as well. So anyway, wanted to share that with you. I hope this frame helps you as you think about the work that you're doing. And so finally, let's just think about this as well. When we think about the sociological imagination, who are teenagers today and what's good news for them? Like, what does good news really look like for them? And how do we think about that? We're going to unpack that more along the way in this class. Secondly, where do our young people need us the most? When we think about the micro, the mid, and the macro, that's going to twist and turn in some different ways for us to think about. Who are or should be our community partners? As you think about your context, like who do you need to partner with? And then also, what are the social forces impacting young people in our community? And do we acknowledge them, right? Maybe there's one that's more pressing than another, depending on your community. You are the one that asks these questions. Young people are counting on you to ask these questions, and I couldn't be more excited that you're in that position. Okay, hope that's helpful. And with that, this is going to wrap up our lectures for this week. And let me just leave you with this, my friends. May you know that the work that you do is incredibly important. That young people are counting on you to be the person that asks the micro, the mid, and the macro questions to help them navigate this world. May you have a view and a vision that helps them understand themselves and helps other generations understand them, so that we, as people of faith, can communicate a gospel that is truly good news to this generation. And may you know God's grace and peace. See you.